warning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Extraordinary seeing Al Gore and Bill Clinton there together with Charlie, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, they did not get into this discussion,
no.
though. But it is fascinating. I mean, lasers, really, to change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far it works. When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now. And in the laboratory, sure enough, they precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam.
So what does it mean for drought areas that need to have rain for crops, and if they don't have them, there's the consequences of famine?
Well, the bad news is if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all, because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
Tonight, investigators are trying to solve a bizarre mystery in Flagler County.
A number of people say they felt the ground shake today. Several people around the Palm Coast area called in to report it. And people in the Daytona North area, as well as in Deltona and as far north as St. Augustine, say they felt it too. Channel 9's Jason Allen is live in Flagler County, and Jason, some worried it was an earthquake.
The Emergency Management Office has been on the phone here all day trying to figure this out. This was not a boom, an audible boom, at least not as described to us, but it was more of an actual shaking, buildings shaking. In fact, a dispatcher here at the county actually felt it happen.
I live alone and I'm blind, and a while ago the house was shaking. Did you happen to know?
I'm not sure. We're actually getting quite a few calls about it now. We're having someone check it out, okay?
That 911 call was one of about a dozen calls that poured into Flagler County about 9:30 Friday morning. An unexplained phenomenon described as everything from a low rumble to a window-shaking movement rattled residents from St. Augustine to Palm Coast.
Around rumbled and the building rumbled, and definitely abnormal for here.
We found at least two people who have experienced sonic booms and earthquakes from time spent in California.
That's what it felt like. It definitely felt like an earthquake.
Enough to make you look toward the ocean and go, okay, what's next? Tsunami?
5/21/2011. It's right now 4:47 a.m. Saturday morning. This noise has been going on since like 3 o'clock, off and on. I don't know what the hell that is. You see the moon up there shining bright. That noise.
this shit out. Listen to that. That is fucking crazy.
What is that from?
I don't know. Sounds like a giant flame or something. I'm gonna walk across the street.
To ask a couple questions here about HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Several of you at the table have a little bit of a piece here. As you know, this is located up in Alaska. It's currently funded by the Airforce Research Lab. It was formerly funded by the Office of Naval Research. One of the prime customers is DARPA, which is currently running experiments at the facilities here. So questions to several of you this morning. I'm told by the president of the University of Alaska that the Air Force has pulled its support for the facility and they're taking steps to demolish it or take it down this summer. He's making the argument that there is other opportunities for us and is trying to find a path where the university might be able to take title to the facility. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Prabhakar. I understand that a lot of folks here on the committee probably don't understand what HAARP does. I think most Alaskans don't really know what HAARP does or why the agency is involved in it. So a very brief explanation and then a more direct question. Would you be disappointed or would you lose something if HAARP were to go away?
Senator Murkowski, as I think you know, one of our programs has been using the HAARP facility for the research that it's pursuing. And my understanding is that we did get value out of that interaction. The P in DARPA is projects, and we're not in the business of doing the same thing forever. So very naturally, as we conclude that work, we're going to move on to other topics. So it's not an ongoing need for DARPA, despite the fact that we had actually gotten some good value out of that infrastructure in the past.
Understood. Then to Dr. Walker and Mr. Schaefer then, Dr. Walker, your agency is currently running the facility. I've mentioned that it's our understanding through the president of UAF that the plans are to move forward and demolish the facility this summer. So the question to you is that accurate? Can you explain why? And then perhaps to both you and Mr. Schaefer, is there any benefit in exploring a potential relationship with the University of Alaska to perhaps take over the HAARP?
Thank you, Senator. The Air Force has gotten great value out of HAARP in the past. We took over from the Navy and managed it and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there and have finished our work that we're interested in doing up there. We've moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the HAARP was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere and be able to actually control it. And, but that work has been completed. The Air Force has maintained the site for other government agencies to use for several years now. And with DARPA completing their project, that's our last government customer that we have in the site. We have put out a call government-wide for other agencies that had interest in managing the site or taking it over, and including going out to academia and seeing if there was any interest there. We have gotten interest from the university in Fairbanks. However, the interest we have is that they will run it if we fund it, which is unfortunately in this fiscal environment we're in right now, this is not an area that we have any need for in the future and don't see that it would be good use of Air Force S&T funds in the